Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here inside Circa in Las Vegas for the Circa Million and Circa Survivor contests, which, by the way, you have until September 9th to visit Las Vegas and sign up for these contests. And it's worth it. It's worth it. It was a very easy flight from Minnesota, and I have been having a great time since I got here to Las Vegas. And joining me, though, back from Minnesota, which I understand is a lot cooler than it was yesterday, is Will Ragatz, of course, of Sports Illustrated, for our little weekly get together. And Will, I missed practice today. This is only the second practice that I've ever missed. Both have come this year, so I barely know the team now that I've missed these two practices. My understanding, though, is that it was not that intense today. It ended early, so nothing was missed by me that's going to change my opinion on our conversation about what they're going to do with this roster, right?
No, nothing too crazy was missed. There actually was. You used the word intense. There was a one moment we didn't have any on Wednesday of like some trash talking and getting up in people's faces when some Cardinals defensive tackle tackled Alexander Mattison all the way to the ground, and the offensive line did not like that and got in his face. But I don't think it ever escalated to like even any shoving, much less a punch being thrown. But yeah, it was a practice where it kind of confirmed a lot of the things that we saw on Wednesday and a lot of things we've seen throughout camp. Like KJ Osborne wasn't there for some unspecified reason, so just keep that in mind. I have no idea if that's serious or not. We probably won't hear from Kevin O'Connell about that until next week. But Jordan Addison was the number 2 wide receiver playing every single rep with the first team offense. And guess what? He's really good. He's still really good. He's been really good all camp. And Byron Murphy had another interception against his former team. Josh Metellus was good. We saw a lot of Ivan Pace. We saw all 3 linebackers mix in with the ones. Pace, Asamoah was back out there. Hicks as well. And then Mekhi Blackman was doing some team stuff. So just nothing crazy, but, anything you thought coming in is probably showed up today.
Well, what do you make of the mixture of linebackers? Because in the walkthrough the other day, we also saw that, but then Asamoah didn't practice with the 11-on-11s when I was there yesterday. So now that he's back, it seems like they want to have some mixture or combination of those guys. Do you think that that's how it plays out when the season comes? And I ask because I've got a little milkshake bet with Andrew Kramer about who the starting linebacker on the first play is going to be other than Jordan Hicks. I've got Ivan Pace. He's got Brian Asamoah. I don't think it's a bad idea at all if they mix and match these guys with the way that Pace has developed as fast as he has, or I guess that, just emerged on the scene so quickly and picked up this defense that's like bonus money. But I never thought that meant that Asamoah is just out of the picture entirely.
Yeah, I'm with you. I thought for a while that, hey, Asamoah's just hurt. Like Pace is getting this run now, but it's still going to be number 33 out there. And then the longer he stayed out and the more I watched Ivan Pace and the more impressed I was like, okay, maybe not. So really early on today, it was Pace and Hicks. And then we saw some Asamoah and Hicks. And then late in practice, there was a period where Hicks was on the sideline and it was the 2 young guys out there flying around. So I think you need Hicks because the size and the experience, and he brings a little bit of a different play style and body type. And that helps against the run and that helps in a variety of ways. Like, I don't think you could get through a whole season having 2 really undersized linebackers, but it's a fun idea that in certain packages, I don't know if this would be a third down thing, if this would be a blitz heavy thing, or what it would be, that Brian Flores could say, all right, Ivan Pace, Brian Asamoah, you're both going out there, fly to the ball, make some plays, because those guys are both just heat-seeking missiles when they're able to diagnose what's happening in front of them. So I think all 3 guys play week 1. As for who will be out there on that very first snap to settle a milkshake bet, I'm not sure right now.
Hey, it matters a lot.
But I think if I had to guess, I would lean Ivan Pace, actually.
I'm going to leave Ivan Pace as well. And I also think it's probably the most important thing of the entire offseason is, how that goes. The other one that's out there still and is going to take the entire season to resolve is Jordan Addison versus KJ Osborne. I guess if I were grading Jordan Addison's training camp, I would probably give him an A. And I'm not going to downgrade somebody because they missed a few practices out of precaution that, he had a concussion. So that's not going to like take away from his grade for me. But I would say really from day 2 on, like the first day, Naylor was taking more reps than him. And we're like, oh, okay, it's kind of interesting. They're going to make him earn it a little bit. And then after that, Naylor was out for such a long period of time. And it seems like Addison is just very much in the competition with KJ Osborne for who could have more receptions and walking away from it. I feel like Addison has shown everything that he could do that you drafted him for, which is really all you can ask for out of someone's camp. We can't guarantee what they're going to be, but what you want to see is what they were touted as. And like, just to use the opposite example, there are some 2022 draft picks that were presented certain ways by draft analysts and the team that we didn't see that at all. And Addison has checked off all those boxes.
Yeah, every single box, everything you heard about him coming out of college, everything the Vikings talked up in their post-draft press conference, that is played out. So to me, you're right that's kind of a good segue, because those are two positions, inside linebacker and wide receiver, where yes, the Vikings are probably going to have to make a depth chart decision where who's the number 2 guy here. But to have multiple guys who can be in that role and who you can use interchangeably and simultaneously and in a variety of different ways, like that's a really good thing for Brian Flores on defense with those linebackers, and for Kevin O'Connell on offense. You can use KJ Osborne in certain situations if maybe you're leaning run more out of that set. You can use Jordan Addison if it's going to be more, I need somebody to beat single coverage. Like to me, it's the same thing where I think the rookie, I feel a little bit better about their long-term prospects, whether it's Pace or Addison. Like just with what I've seen from training camp and how consistent they've been, that's maybe who I would pick to be the number 2. But KJ Osborne isn't going to go away. Like he's going to be a really important part of this offense all year, run blocking, playing out of the slot, doing all these different things. So Jordan Addison's been great. He had a play today in one-on-ones where he just went up and mossed a Cardinals defensive back, which is not something you see all the time from guys who are his size. So that was pretty impressive. He was all over the place during team on Wednesday. So yeah, he's lived up to every bit of the hype so far.
Sarah asks, will Jordan Addison be wide receiver 2 by week 1? I just think, Will, that at this moment, and this is another point to be made, that will his body hold up for a whole season? I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I have concerns about that, but how can we predict that? I mean, there are receivers in the league. The guy he was compared to was Tyler Lockett, that learn how to protect themselves. And he's going to have to not play with reckless abandon. He's going to have to play with some abandon in order to make sure that he stays healthy. And blocking is tough for those guys, and random freak things happen. So I don't know. Irv Smith had somebody fall on him last year and was like injury prone. Like, I mean, I don't know. Someone just fell on him. What was he supposed to do? So things happen. But to the question of whether he's wide receiver 2, he has earned targets in this offense. He's earned lots of reps in this offense, but figuring out who's wide receiver 2 and 3, I just don't think that actual football works that way. I think actual football works as every single play in this offense is designed to go to Justin Jefferson. And whoever's the second option depends on what the defense is doing. And so if the defense is doing more to stop him on a particular day than Osborne, then Osborne will have more catches. And if they're doing more to stop Osborne, then he will have more catches. Or maybe Hawkinson will have more catches, or maybe Josh Oliver. Like, I don't know. It really depends on who is the next man down based on how the defense is matching up against you. And every single week, you're going to see some sort of new plan by every team against Justin Jefferson. So that to me is what it comes down to. I think that they could both be looked at as, at this moment, as receivers 2A and 2B. It just depends on who they want in when there's 2 tight ends or a fullback.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I think Kevin O'Connell just having all of these tools in his arsenal to deploy in various ways. It's just the puzzle. It's the chess match of what are you doing defensively? How can we beat that? How can we adjust in game to adapt to whatever we're seeing defensively and get to what we want to get to and be multiple and all of these things that they talk about. And to do that, you want to have a bunch of different guys. And so I don't know who will be technically the wide receiver 2, but I agree with you. They're both going to play a ton. They're both going to be involved. I think Addison has more of the long-term future. I mean, KJ Osborne's going into a contract year. KJ Osborne also, we have no idea. I mean, he missed today's practice. We have no idea if that could be a 1 week or 2 week thing suddenly. And then Jordan Addison is obviously the wide receiver too. Maybe it's just a day, 1 day thing, and he's back out there next week. But yeah, it's going to be really game plan dependent, defense dependent, all of these things. Jalen Naylor, I think, can factor in. Brandon Powell, like they have a lot of weapons in the wide receiver room, in the tight end room as well, to deploy against defenses. And I think that's a really good thing for Kevin O'Connell.
So Mateo says Addison is a twig who was hurt in college. Are we surprised he has already been hurt? Well, I mean, he hasn't really. It was just 1 day where he fell wrong, which can happen to anybody. And he missed OTAs and minicamp, which I'm not too concerned about since he's been in for almost every single practice. What did he miss? 2 practices through the entire training camp. I think it's something that you can't discount when someone is that size. But also, I don't know that history says that just being small equals you get hurt all the time at that position. There's been small receivers in the NFL that play long careers. There's your Julian Edelmans or your Taylor Gabriel was probably the smallest receiver I think I've ever seen. Andrew Hawkins played in the league for a while. Like I don't know. I think what my point about Irv Smith Jr. was, he had no history of being injured and then had it happen 2 years in a row. And then everyone just assumed that he was injury prone. He might play 10 years in a row without any injuries. That was the Kyle Rudolph story early in his career. So I don't know. I think it's fair to bring up the size, but it's not a predictor. And also, how hurt was he in college? I mean, I think he missed a couple games, but he played the whole 2021 and won the Blitnikoff Award. So he was healthy enough for that season. So I don't know. I just wouldn't put like one time getting banged up in training camp and say, I'm really, really worried about that. I also think that when a guy is in the slot and can play underneath, that does protect him, but rookies do get hurt because they put their bodies through a lot. Let's talk about the big picture though of this training camp, because now it's over. I mean, wow, what a journey, right? We just go out there every day and then sweat and get sunburn and we write our stories and everything else. And there's all sorts of things that happen and rumors about Trey Lance and whatever. It's always a wild ride. And now that it's over and the roller coaster has come all the way to the end, how would you grade the entire training camp, start to finish, for the Minnesota Vikings?
I think it has to be at least in like the B range. Cause I mean, we've talked about this in previous weeks. Like a lot of the things that they went into it wanting to see, they saw. And that was Jordan Addison having an excellent first training camp, Mekhi Blackmon rising up the depth chart and surpassing, kind of clearing the Juwan Williams bar to become a starter. Byron Murphy has looked every bit the part as their number 1 cornerback. Josh Metellus and all of the versatility of Brian Flores' defense. I mean, a huge story of this training camp was just how flustered the Vikings offense, like pre-joint practices, was getting going against Brian Flores' defense every day, and all of the different looks that they can give you, and the depth and versatility they have at linebacker and they have at safety. And even today, there were more times where I've been talking about the 2 linebackers thing, where it was just 1 linebacker out there and they're in dime. They've got 3 cornerbacks, 3 safeties. Josh Metellus is lining up on the line of scrimmage like he's going to blitz and then dropping back into coverage, and just all these things they can do. I think the development of Brian Flores, not only his scheme, but his philosophy and kind of, it's an overused word, but kind of just a culture of defense. I think that went really well. I think the Ivan Pace thing is a big story. I mean, there's certain things where I'd be hesitant to maybe give it an A. Like, I don't know that some guys flashed in the way they wanted to. Lewis Seen and Andrew Booth, the top 2 guys in last year's draft who we've talked a ton about. It really, they didn't kind of take the steps that you might have wanted to see. About Nick Mullins, he had kind of another poor day today against the Cardinals, and just the second team offense, like some of the depth there hasn't really stepped up the way you'd want to. But that's kind of nitpicking. Like we already knew that if Kirk Cousins misses any time and you have to play Nick Mullins, it's probably not going to go super well. But I would give it a B. I'd probably give it a B plus, just because I think top to bottom, both phases. I mean, even Greg Joseph and the special team side, Najee Thompson emerging in the preseason. Like, it seems to me like things have gone pretty well. I don't know how much that means. I mean, you'd rather have that than have injuries piling up and guys struggling to play well that you counted on to play well. But I'm giving them a B plus, but I will say take that with a grain of salt. That does not suddenly mean that they're going to go win 12 games. Although I still predicted them to win 11. And as we discussed earlier, I'm still sticking to it until proven otherwise.
So it's funny, I'm in a weird position because in previous seasons and training camps, I could be described as maybe a little bit curmudgeon about where it was all going. Because
Cynical.
a lot of times, well, yeah, I mean, a lot of times I would walk out of camp being like, I don't know. It doesn't look any better than it was last year. And then every year it would be kind of the same thing. I mean, 2020, the training camp, you couldn't really tell because it was a very short camp, so short that they couldn't even get Justin Jefferson like enough reps to feel good about starting him right away. And I don't even blame them for that. It was really that short of a training camp, and because of COVID and everything. And then you have 2021 where there was the COVID controversy, and you just got the sense that the culture was going to be so bad that they weren't going to be able to overcome anything, even if they had a decent roster. And last year, there were very few questions really to be answered throughout training camp other than can they get the offense down? And the offense had great days and bad days, which it did to start the season as well. And I guess I was feeling like, I don't know if they're going to have a great offense throughout training camp. This year, I'm walking out feeling like a lot of the biggest questions that I had were answered, and I'm trying to avoid looking at the forest through the trees or I'm trying to see the forest through the trees because the small things are not good. The 2022 draft class did not step up in any way, except for a Caleb Evans who looks, I mean, I think pretty good the way that he's played. But aside from that, all those articles that we wrote, who are the guys who have the biggest chance to step up in camp and take the biggest leaps forward? And a lot of them did not do it. I would say one of the biggest disappointments of all of camp is for 3 years now, I've been like, this Kene Nwangwu guy, man, if he just gets the ball, just give him the ball. Well, you can't give him the ball if he's sidelined for all of training camp. Jalen Naylor was one of the more kind of intriguing players, didn't practice through the entire training camp. So things like that. But also, are those the guys who are going to determine the final result? Or is it Jordan Addison, which I think makes a big deal? Is it Brian Flores? I think Brian Flores finding a lot of different ways to use players, even as you mentioned today with Asamoah and Ivan Pace, like that matters. So I come out of it saying, and then just major injuries. Is there a single major injury? There isn't. So I come out of it with all that saying that's all really, really good. But no contract extension for Hawkinson, no contract extension for Jefferson. They kick the ball down the road again or they can, whatever. They kick something down the road again with Danielle Hunter. So like once again, we'll address this in the future if we ever do. And not signing him to a long-term extension, but keeping him anyway. Those to me would not get super high grades. Actually, not having Jefferson extended is an F. You needed to get that done. And it's not completely over yet. But if we count the front office elements, the fact that we're still talking about, well, you need to add this and you need to add that and you need a free agent and you need you need to make a trade or whatever to fill out some of these spots. I don't think that's looking very good. So I think that the players and the coaches that matter for this season did well, but I think from the front office perspective, there's still questions to be answered, and there's still some spots where we probably could have figured out by day 3 or 4 that were going to be needs that were never addressed, and I kind of don't understand why still. And somebody asked, let me display it on the screen here. Who was it? Sorry, scrolling. This is what you guys get for actually showing up. Patrick was asked about the guard play, and it hadn't been very good. And just are they considering a free agent? And there's no way they can feel confident. But we knew that by the first preseason game. So those are the things that I think I would downgrade them for, and I would probably land on a B overall. But it's two separate grades for me. It's like an A over here with the players and coaches, and then a C for or an incomplete for the front office, probably.
Yeah, I agree that it's kind of two separate things. And you asked me the question. I'm just thinking like, what am I seeing on the field? And I think that's B plus, maybe creeping into A minus territory. But you're right. It is strange that the front office has handled this or not handled this situation or certain situations the way that they have. It's odd to me that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah seems just really reluctant to hand out any sort of long-term contract to anybody. And I guess I get it to some extent. Like a lot of times those don't go particularly well and you don't get a whole lot of excess value and you got to figure out the salary cap and he wants to, use his leverage and be patient and do things like that. But at a certain point, I mean, obviously with Justin Jefferson, like you just want to get that done. Well, if you don't get it done, you wait till next year and he goes out and he does what he's been doing the first 3 years of his career, which there's no indication that he won't do again. Like the price is just going to go up. So I don't see how that really helps. And then you risk it being awkward where he's going into the potential 5th-year option and maybe he feels disrespected that they didn't extend him after his 3rd year or whatever. With TJ Hawkinson, I guess I get it to some extent. If there was a report that Hawkinson wants a historic contract that's going to kind of reset the market at tight end. And I don't know if he's that kind of guy, but he's in position to do it with his age and with what he did in the second half of last season. So I guess I get being patient there, but that's another weird thing now where they've spent all offseason talking up how important TJ Hawkinson is to what they want to do on offense. Like Kevin O'Connell specifically has talked about that a bunch. And now there's this whole situation where he had an ear infection and now he's got back stiffness. And I don't know when we're going to see him. And he says he's going to be ready for week 1, but it's kind of an odd dynamic. So yeah, it's a strange thing with the front office. I think incomplete is the right way to structure it because they still have time with Jefferson. They still have time with Hawkinson. There's more than 2 weeks until week 1. Like these things can kind of go up until right before the season starts. We saw that with like Dalvin Cook and Brian O'Neill, I believe. It's possible. And then I think we were talking about this a little bit just really briefly before we started recording. Like this roster could look pretty different 1 week from right now. And remember last year, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah trades for Jalen Reagor. He trades for Ross Blacklock. There was a few surprise cuts. There's just always kind of things that you can keep an eye out for where it's not as simple as we're going on Tuesday, we're going from 90 to 53. And then out of those 37 cuts, we'll sign 16 to the practice squad. Like, no, you're constantly perusing and you've got a whole scouting department that's looking at preseason tape from every other preseason game in the league. And they're studying the analytics and putting these players into their models and finding players with really fast 10-yard splits in the 40 because that's what this front office seems to love. And there's going to be guys that get cut by other teams that they bring in. There's probably going to be a trade or two if Adofo-Mensah's past is any indication. So I would give it incomplete. There's still some veteran free agents out there that they've brought in for visits that they now have kind of some good information on. Kareem Hunt, Dalton Reisner, and a whole bunch of other guys that you could bring in for a visit and see if they fit. So there's still some holes on this roster. I think guard, which was brought up, is an obvious one. I think cornerback depth and running back depth and a few other spots, but there's time for this roster to change before week 1 against Tampa Bay.
So Digits brings this up. Is it possible the last administration broke stuff so badly with old players, bad contracts, and cap issues that it will take more years to deal with it all? They certainly have still been working their way through it, but this offseason was a huge step forward in dealing with all of that by moving on from some of those older players. And they are going to have a good amount of dead cap hit for next year because of it. If Kirk Cousins leaves, a big portion is his, but then, not the only ones that are going to have some of that dead cap space. And then you have some void years mixed in that if you don't keep a Marcus Davenport or whatever, if you end up cutting him, I don't know how that's going to play out. I think he's looked pretty good, but if it doesn't work out, then you're taking on more dead cap and so forth. So they are still working their way through what happened with the previous front office. But in my mind, this was the offseason where they became Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's roster. I just think that we might be dealing with a different way of handling things than with the previous regime, because with the previous regime, the circumstances were just different. It was, you went to the NFC Championship in 2017. Now you are going back or you're under pressure every single year, which means, oh, this guy wants a little bit more money or he's going to want out okay, we got to give it to him. It means, oh, Daniil Hunter got hurt. We have to make a trade for Yannick Ngakoue. We're nervous about our kicker and punter, so we got a kicker and a punter. Irv Smith got hurt. And even though Tyler Conklin was good and we all freaking knew it, they go and get Chris Herndon. Like, I don't know. Those were bad things to be that desperate. But now when they're moving at a different pace and they're being more deliberate and maybe a little more discerning, then we're like, hey, what are you doing? But I think that's justified. I'm not saying you're wrong for feeling that way. Like, you got to figure this out with Justin Jefferson. There's no two ways about this. There might be a Hawkinson debate about 17 plus million, but I also take some of that at a little bit grain of salt because I mean, it's pretty clear where it comes from when they're saying, oh, he wants to reset the tight end market. Like, okay, well, did a team tell you that? I'm sure his agent would say, no, we don't. We want a very reasonable offer. So maybe his agent needs to get into a reporter's ear as well. But the point just being that you do have to get some of these done. You can't just sort of slow play everything. And I think it hurt them ultimately to slow play Delvin, to slow play za'darius Smith, because they didn't have the flexibility to sign some other players. And now we're sitting here going, ooh, guard, ooh, like depth pass rusher, ooh, corner. Like, these are things that if they had moved on from those guys earlier, maybe you could have addressed. And so it's like a double-edged sword to all of that. I guess it's a new approach that we're all sort of getting used to. But I thought by this time, at least one of those guys would be signed to an extension. And I also thought if you're bringing in those players for free agent visits, that would be clear upgrades. How long do you want to wait before you're going to pull the trigger? Like, how much more do you need to see out of Ty Chandler or Dwayne McBride to be sure about that? Now, how ready are they going to be to actually play for your team?
Yeah, you're right that it is a different approach, and then you brought up kind of the previous regime and Rick Spielman, where it was we're going to draft player, and Rick Spielman, to his credit, was really consistently pretty good in the draft. So they would draft these players, they would turn into Pro Bowl caliber players, and then they would reward their own, and they would Dalvin Cook, Brian O'Neill, Daniil Hunter, Everson Griffin, Stephon, like the list goes on and on. They would reward those guys and give them big contracts that weren't like resetting the market at their positions, but were paying them pretty handsomely for what they had accomplished and keeping them around and trying to build continuity and all these things. And then there's another, and some of those didn't age well, just at all. I mean, the Dalvin Cook one stands out the most. There's the other complete other side of the spectrum of what we've seen so far from Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, which is a real hesitancy to lock into big money commitments for several years. And even his free agency signings, it's been all about flexibility. It's let's give Byron Murphy a 2-year deal. Let's give Marcus Davenport a 1-year deal. Like, even with za'darius Smith, when they first signed him, it was a 3-year deal with outs. Like, and I think Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has done a good job. If you look at the 2024 salary cap and you look at the 2025 salary cap, and like after a few dead cap hits next year, like there's not a lot there. There's a lot of flexibility here that they've built. But at some point, you gotta like pick a direction and find some key cornerstone guys to keep around that you're going to use that salary cap space that you've created to pay them. And I think there's no doubt that they want to pay Justin Jefferson and they want to keep him around. Like, that's not a discussion even. It's I guess they're still sticking to kind of the terms that they want to have there, but they're going to try to make that happen eventually. The Hawkinson thing is definitely a debate because of kind of the positional value stuff with tight end and how much are you comfortable giving him? And you have the leverage of he can play off this year. We could tag him next year for a reasonable price. You'd let him walk and get a comp pick. Like, I get that, but with Darasaw's coming down the line, like at some point there's kind of a happy medium you want to find where you're not handing out 5-6 year deals to everybody like Rick Spielman was, but you're paying your positionally valuable cornerstone guys to keep them around, so you're not suddenly having to look to try to replace them. I don't know how TJ Hawkinson exactly fits into all of that. I think from his perspective, he showed in the second half last year that he was a really important piece of this offense with the blocking and with just kind of being the number 2 target and taking stuff away from Justin Jefferson and taking advantage when defenses are heavily shading towards Justin Jefferson. But like when you have Jordan Addison in the picture now, how crucial is Hawkinson to what you want to do. You have Josh Oliver as well, who is not nearly the same level of receiver, but he's a better blocker. And so it's all an interesting puzzle. And I'm curious to see over the course of the next year or two where Kwesi adofo-mensah kind of settles in terms of how he views long-term roster building.
You know what's interesting to me is that this is also part of something happening here with players where they are pushing back in ways that we haven't seen as much recently. So maybe one a year in the offseason, it was like Khalil Mack or something is sitting out training camp. But for the most part, I don't think you were seeing it all around the league in the aggressive ways that it has happened this offseason. So Sarah's asking about trading for Jonathan Taylor. I mean, I think it'd be fun as hell, but I mean, if they, you just probably don't have the capital to give up for the future. And it would, I mean, they'd be a great offense if you did. And maybe there's a small argument to do it. And let me just real quick, and I'll get back to the point. The small argument would be you give yourself a chance to win the Super Bowl if you could be in the top 5 in offense. And if that guy was the best version of himself, you might be in the top 5 in offense. That's no, I'm not saying I advocate doing that. But the point just being that you have Jonathan Taylor trying to force his way out. Andy Reid saying he's not sure if Chris Jones is going to play. Haven't heard anything about Josh Jacobs. There's been just a lot of these. And now you have TJ Hawkinson with every ailment under the sun. We had we had a real gout controversy on the show the other day when I made a joke about like that's what's coming next, and then I looked up what that is, and that sounds horrible, and I'm sorry, but but the point is like we have him skipping camp in a hold-in situation. It appears over this time, and even Danielle Hunter, who had never fought back this way, even at least pressing back against the team a little bit until he got a lot of cash in his pocket, and I just think it's part of a larger trend with players who in this CBA have really kind of had it handed to them for the most part by the owners, except unless you're a quarterback and, a handful of superstar players. So a lot of guys who are really good, like Hawkinson, Jacobs, Taylor, but are not Mahomes necessarily. I think they're trying to fight for every dollar they can get for. And I don't think we can just say, no, you didn't extend them, so you fail to the front office, because there's two parties that have to negotiate here.
Yeah, for sure. That's what's tough about the whole conversation with TJ Hawkinson is like you can say, hey, Kwesi, hurry up and get this done. This guy is an important part of our future. But like if they're asking for a certain amount, it's become very clear that Kwesi and this regime, they're not gonna just give in and give them that. And they have kind of their plan, their time horizon, and here's a number that we can fit you in on. We might meet you in the middle a little bit, but we're this is our number. This is our range that we are willing to go to. So yeah, I don't know what ends up happening there. I think it's entirely possible that nothing happens and Hawkinson goes into the season and he just plays and it's fine and you figure it out from there. And it's not ideal for TJ Hawkinson, certainly, but I think that's a quite a possible outcome of this. Jefferson is a different thing because I mean he's earned the extension, he's eligible for the extension, but he's not going into a contract year. But man, I mean, the future of this team is just so uncertain, which makes it a really exciting time period. Like this season is going to look a lot like last season did roster wise. There were some minor tweaks, but you look at next offseason and Kirk Cousins is going to be a free agent and Danielle Hunter is going to be a free agent. And to a lesser degree, Marcus Davenport is going to be a free agent and KJ Osborne. And as of right now, TJ Hawkinson, like there's a lot of important parts of this currently constructed 2023 team that are not locked in beyond this season. So that gives them a lot of flexibility and that can be a good thing or it could turn into a bad thing and your roster gets a lot worse next year. I don't know how it's going to end up. But I don't know. For right now, I'm just looking forward to kind of seeing, well, I'm not looking forward to this last preseason game, if I'm being honest, because it's just going to be a lot of like Jaron Hall and third and fourth stringers, but good opportunity for them. But I'm looking forward to next week and roster cut down day and the possibility of trades and the possibility of free agent signings and just kind of wheeling and dealing roster movement. And I'm curious how that all comes together this year. And then if we do see before week 1, any real extensions that start to shape 2024, 2025.
Yeah, I really should have named this podcast something different than previewing the final preseason game, because that is not what we've done at all. Nor is it that interesting in comparison to the bigger picture of this team, which I think is one of the most fascinating in the NFL. I but I guess the way I'm trying to do it is what we asked people to do at the beginning of camp. So we did a podcast and got bit by mosquitoes outside of TCO Performance Center. I remember it all too well, as Taylor Swift said. Uh, and we talked about how there was going to be patience required here, that this wasn't going to be something that was going to happen likely fast and that could play out way longer than any of us wanted to. But also, like, I think about the way they handled Dalvin Cook, where they waited and waited and waited and waited, and it got really hilarious by the end. And also, by the way, the national reporting on this team has not been good. I mean, it's not been accurate, to be honest. It just hasn't. Like, when there are reports that they're going to trade or they're looking into Danielle Hunter trades, and then the next day they sign him to a big, contract for this year and this year only. That's just not accurate. It was, a lot of people reported that that they were looking into places to trade Dalvin Cook where he'd be used best or whatever, and they ended up cutting him. So in some ways, and it's not about the reporters specifically who those people are. It's just been how dialed in or how much is getting leaked that actually ends up playing out the way that it does. And I don't know that that's been really the case as much as it was maybe in some previous years. So that's where I don't want to overreact to these things and say, like, oh man, I just can't believe that you haven't gotten these done. But there also is a part of me that's like, you better make sure you keep some of these players, because you aren't winning anything if you don't have great players on this offense. Even if the next quarterback, we are so early in the Jefferson process, but you really don't want what happened or with San Francisco and Nick Bosa, where it's sitting out training camp and then you never know where it goes from there. So that's been, I think, as interesting as anything that has happened on the field. And Jordan asked, do we think that Hockenson is betting on himself? I don't think so. I think what Hockenson is doing is that he's looking at how he performed last year as a Viking, projecting that out, saying, if you guys are going to throw to me 125 times and I'm going to catch 90 passes, I want to get paid $17+ million, like guys who have those types of numbers. And I think they're saying, how about 15 million? And they are not able to close that gap. That's kind of how I look at this. But we also need to keep in mind, as of right now, they can tag him and he's on the team for next year. So there's a lot of things that are at play here. But I do want to ask about the preseason game, not because I think it's going to be good or exciting or interesting, but I wonder about if there's anybody on the field that you think it matters for. Like, who does it matter for in this final preseason game?
Man, it's tough because, like I was saying, it's gonna be like these third and fourth stringer guys, and not even a lot of twos, I would imagine. And I just don't know how much you can do in a Saturday noon preseason game against the Arizona Cardinals to really swing the decision based on comparing that to the previous month's body of work, or even several months body of work dating back to OTAs and rookie minicamp and whatever, if that player has been here the whole time. But there are guys, like, you think about, maybe Brandon Powell and Jalen Reagor play, and that competition for punt returner / wide receiver 6 continues. Maybe Tristan Jackson gets out there, and I think Thayer Thomas, like, I'm just thinking kind of by position here, I think he's pretty securely on, like, the practice squad. I don't know if there's really any way for him to make the roster. He had another one where I look over today and he just absolutely shaked a Cardinals defensive back out of his boots. Like, that guy can run routes, but just with this wide receiver room, we saw N'Keal Harry get waived because he was hurt. Like, I just don't think Thayer Thomas can crack that. I don't know, like, defensive backs, defensive line, like, all across the roster, if you're a guy who's not clearly getting cut and not clearly on the team, it probably does matter. And maybe it's not, I'm going to swing a decision, because I imagine the Vikings are already drawing up the 53. I mean, obviously on the 53, like on the whiteboard, like you see in Hard Knocks with other teams, like they're already planning out who's going to be on this roster. Maybe you can swing it a little bit, but it also matters because if you put good tape out there in this game, then maybe some other team will notice and give you a shot. So I think it matters to pretty much everybody that's going to be out there playing and is going to be kind of fighting for their football future.
Yeah, I think this is one of those you're trying out for all 32 teams type of games for most people, but
Yeah.
I am curious about I'd like to see at some point, and who's playing quarterback might hurt this, but at some point, Tristan Jackson get a chance to really play in a game because we've talked him up about his training camp a lot, but he got what like 3 targets. And that's about it for the preseason game. And one of them was it was a weird drop because you couldn't see on TV how the timing was thrown off by him slipping on the route. But like still, it just hasn't had a chance to go out there and do something that would say, put me on the roster. So is somebody going to kind of make enough plays to demand they're on the roster? How much anybody plays will probably tell us a lot. Are we going to see Ty Chandler? Because that probably means someone else is coming in here. But then again, they don't exactly have a ton of running backs to really use, but they can use the XFL guys and so forth. If he's out there playing, I don't know. Like that doesn't mean that to me. That means they don't feel that great about him. But there isn't really going to be a whole lot to take out of this preseason game. And even when it comes to the roster, surprise cuts. Everyone always wants to know who you think could be the surprise cut. And I always say, well, then it won't be a surprise if I could figure it out. But I got nothing for this roster. I mean, I don't even have candidates because I know that people are just asking for like, who could it be? But I got nothing. I mean, Jordan Hicks would have been the guy when you came into camp. Like, well, if he really falls off the face of the earth, it's not like they owe him a lot of money or something and whatever. But there was never a candidate to take his job. So I can't even figure out who anyone would be that would be a surprise because they're usually either older veterans that may have lost it or they are younger guys that you think they're going to give them longer. Kene Wongwu, but that doesn't, I don't know. Are you cutting one of the best kick returners in the league because he's injured? Probably not. I mean, I don't know. I honestly cannot figure out who a surprise cut would be.
Yeah, none jump out to me either. I think Kene Wongwu, I think he probably ends up on PUP or IR or something to start the year. I mean, I don't know if we even know what this injury is. I think maybe lower body, but it's just been lingering forever. I mean, yeah, I couldn't pick out who a surprise cut. I agree with your point though that it's just as much about watching whoever's out there and seeing if anybody stands out or whatever as it is just who plays, and that will be notable. I mean, Ty Chandler is a good example. Andrew Booth Jr. I mean, I imagine probably plays, and that's somebody where they want to continue evaluating. Like, does Ivan Pace Jr. even play? Usually you'd think this is going to be the time for the undrafted rookies. He's no longer in that camp. He is now in the competing to be a starter camp. I don't know if he plays at all. Maybe if they just want more reps in this scheme, but I would guess no. So then you're talking about like Wilson Huber and a bunch of just other random linebackers playing. And yeah, it's going to be who plays, who doesn't play, which will be notable. Can anybody stand out? And yeah, I don't know. It's tough to come up with like, oh, get pumped for this noon preseason finale. I mean, it'll be interesting to watch Jaren Hall, and you hope that he can. I thought he took small steps of progress from game 1 to game 2, and you'd like to see that continue. But again, it's tough to evaluate Jaren Hall in the context of he's playing behind a third string offensive line and he's throwing to third string wide receivers, and it's just it tends to be sloppy football. So it's hard to kind of figure out how well he's executing his part of all of that. I don't know. I'm sure all the diehards and the sickos are going to be tuned into this, and I'm going to be there in the press while you're going to be there. Like, we're going to be watching, but I just don't know how much it really matters.
Yeah, it's okay that I'll be recovering from, although I'm not a Vegas partier, but the change of the time change messes with me. When I go from West Coast to Central, it feels like someone took something from me. Right when you when you get out here, you're like, oh, 2 more hours, this is awesome. But then when you lose them on the way back, I hate that. So I'm gonna be dealing with the time change and then waking up to go to a noon game. That's just weird. And then if the Cardinals coach calls a timeout in the fourth quarter, I may throw something on the field, like out of frustration, like Tennessee did. It's not going to be great. If you're going, go early, see the warmups, try to have fun with your kids. Otherwise, there's probably not going to be a whole lot to see. I am curious how Jaron Hall looks, but shout out to the Dorian Thompson Robinson people. Good for you guys. I can't tell you how many people were in the mentions in the comments being like, hey, what do you think of Dorian Thompson Robinson? And my answer was usually, well, I actually watched a lot of him. Pac-12 After Dark is built for me. And I really enjoyed watching him play, but I thought, well, fifth round, I don't even really have much to say. But he balled out in preseason and he won the number 2 job in Cleveland. So shout out to all you people who were DTRs. I do want to circle back here. I was just going to say, I don't think anything is left on the line. I think they've decided everything. And the most interesting story between now and cutdown day is, are there any trades and what positions are they trying to fill? But even then, I think we figured that out by now. It would be depth running back. It might be a cornerback if they're not super thrilled with like Jawan Williams being the backup. It might be an offensive lineman. So that's kind of where we're at. And then we'll see if there's any surprises. But I did want to circle back to this Digits and Digits. You're one of my favorite commenters. So you said, you're buying tickets and NFL merchandise and stuff, and the prices are astronomical. And then guys pull crap like this before the season. You're talking about Hawkinson. It's a big FU to fans. I have never looked at it that way, and I don't think you'll ever convince me to look at it that way. First of all, TJ Hawkinson doesn't set those prices. TJ Hawkinson didn't sign the collective bargaining agreement. He doesn't set the salary cap. TJ Hawkinson has a very limited number of years in his life to maximize what his worth is, and his agent has the job to maximize what his client's worth is. If we start talking about what players make in all sports, let's look at the NBA, where Cole Aldrich made like $10 million to be the 13th guy on the Minnesota Timberwolves. Like, none of it makes any sense in the terms of what reality is, and none of it is fair to fans. I 100% agree that it is not fair to charge the prices they do, to where if you want to go to a football game, it better be a preseason game because you can't afford it. I don't respect at all what they ask fans to pay for jerseys. I mean, if they print the logo on this Pepsi bottle, they will charge you $47 for it, and that is BS. But that's not what TJ Hawkinson did. TJ Hawkinson is comparing his worth to his peers, and that's what his agent's job is to do. And he's only going to be able to do this. Jerry Jones can own the Dallas Cowboys for a lifetime, whereas TJ Hawkinson could be a tight end for maybe 8 to 10 years and maximize what he's worth. So that's how the world works. And also, Digits, and to everybody else who made a similar comment, I root for you to get paid more too by your boss. I think, everybody, I don't have a boss, but I always root for everybody who's doing the work to get as much as they're worth. So that's something that I don't look at. I look at players when you have a CBA, and sorry, Will, to go on this rant, but when you have a CBA that went out of its way to restrict players from having any way to go against owners to try to use any tool to get more and to like have any leverage at all, to eliminate that. It went out of its way to eliminate that. What are players supposed to do? I mean, if it eliminated essentially the holdout, then you have to take other routes. So I don't want to hold this against TJ Hawkinson at all. I mean, this is how negotiations work. And also, it always drives me insane how many people always want to like side against a very good player who it'll probably get worked out with anyway. So we'll see how it ends up going. But I just horse feathers, I look 2 hours younger. Yeah, I don't think that's how that works. But anyway, that's just the TJ Hawkinson has every right to get what he's worth compared to his peers in the NFL. And I hope it works out as well. Because I've been very much on the side that they should sign him. And I also think with Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, he just doesn't work being like under pressure, I think that he doesn't work on the timeline like Spielman did, where it was like, got to get it done, got to get it out the first week of camp, got to give them what they need because we're trying to win. It's just a different situation than it was before, where I think he can hold the line on a price more than maybe Spielman could in the past. So sorry, Will, that's the rant.
No, I like the rant. I don't have much to add on to it. I'm with you. I think with the sheer amount of money that the owners make, I will always be on the side of the players maximizing their worth. And these teams can just cut you or restructure your contract or do whatever at a moment's notice and kind of force you to be okay with that or say that you're going to be gone. Like I think of Riley Reef as an example of that. So I'm all for the players maximizing their worth and getting as much as they can. And selfishly, I would like to watch TJ Hawkinson in this offense for years to come because I think he fits really well with Justin Jefferson. But if it doesn't work out between the two sides and he ends up somewhere else and the Vikings just do something else at tight end, then I think they can probably make that work too. So we'll see.
So, yeah, I see that, T. Kubler in the comments mentioning that, he's not as good as some of the other top tight ends and talking about resetting the market. Resetting the market is clearly leaked language for a reason. Just do not take that seriously. You don't know, and I don't know what their agent is actually asking for. I think it's clear that there's a gap in the price. But I also think that TJ Hawkinson is a very good player. And so I wouldn't put him up there with George Kittle either. I think George Kittle's one of the best players of like the last 10 years. Travis Kelce's probably a top 5 tight end, maybe in history. He's been that great with Patrick Mahomes. So yeah, I mean, and those guys are underpaid probably as well. It's complicated, but you can see also how, sometimes teams play the game with that reset the tight end market,
But don't just think of it as like TJ Hawkinson wants, and even if he said this or not, like the idea of resetting the market, don't evaluate it as he's not better than Travis Kelce, so why he shouldn't do that. Like, first of all, Travis Kelce is like 35 and TJ Hawkinson is 26 or 27 or whatever he is. Like, these are very different situations. It's rarely at one time the absolute best player who is the highest paid, because it's the older guy who like got paid and then is no longer the best player, like Matt Ryan or whatever, or Derek Carr, or like these are guys who have at one point been the highest paid quarterback in NFL history or whatever it is. Like the market and all these things are just kind of they're strange, and they're tied to your age and projecting your future performance and your past performance and all of these different things. So that's something that I've just seen in my mentions when like people are talking about like, oh, he's not better than Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce. Why should he get paid like that? And first of all, we don't know if that's actually what they're asking for. And second of all, like think about the age and think about projecting and things like that. That's all I'll say.
And I guess, yeah. And those are all great points. And I just think I'm trying to like caution against seeing the language of one report from one reporter and just thinking that we know everything about the negotiation. Like, I just don't think that that's the case, because we saw that word resetting the tight end market, which seems intentional. So that's just my feeling on it. And we'll see how it plays out. The other thing is you have a franchise tag with Hawkinson next year. And so there is still leverage from the teams' side. But I just think that there are more players going along this sort of route. And it's something that we're going to see as we go into the future. And it's something that the front office is going to have to work with in order to be successful. All right, Will, predict the final score of Viking. No, I'm just kidding. Let's see. Hold on. Matt's got a question here.
I wonder if the Cardinals play Josh Dobbs, who they just traded for. Probably not. But that's a fascinating team. This is an entirely separate thing. But
could be.
Since the start of training camp, they just traded, or not since the start of joint practices this week, they just traded away Isaiah Simmons and Josh Jones. Like, this team is just all bold-faced tanking before the season even starts, and now they're going to maybe have Josh Dobbs be their tank commander, or I mean, it could still be Colt McCoy. I don't know, but that is a team that wants Caleb Williams right there. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, a nice little JV squad to practice against for a couple of days. Hey, should the Vikings have traded for Isaiah Simmons, 7th round pick? I don't know, maybe, right? He could have just walked over to the locker room. He wouldn't have even had to get on a flight.
Yeah. It's true. It's true.
I feel like they should have got, like, I don't know. Isaiah Simmons is probably terrible, but if there's somebody, they've been taking shots on all these bust draft picks, so like, why not? Just real quick, we'll fit this one in. Could you talk a bit about Kwesi and how not vocal he is to fans and media? Seems like other GMs are a lot more vocal, so we're left guessing. He has not done a ton. Oh, and then there's a second part of the question. Do you feel the Vikings have a vision? Right now, they seem like they're just playing season to season versus a 3-year plan. So two things. One, I would say in terms of media availabilities, it's on the lower side of the NFL. He has not talked more than Rick Spielman, and maybe even a tad less, but probably about the same. But I do feel like if you look at the press conference, and this is from our perspective of going to everything, the press conference before training camp, I thought he was very open about what competitive rebuilding is, and I do feel like they have a very clear vision. And whether it's going to work, I don't know. But the vision was to try to win last year, do everything you can to win last year, and then remove a lot of the older parts and try to get the cap right. Not lock yourself into a quarterback in the future, get a new quarterback in 2024, and then try to do all the things that everybody does with a new quarterback in the draft, which is hit on that player and then build around with the salary cap and the space that you get. So, I mean, I think that it has been kind of from the outset when he first said competitive rebuild exactly what we thought it was going to be. And the overall vision I've been very much bought into. The details, not always, but the overall vision, I think, is as right as you can be when your owners won't let you tank.
Yeah, I agree. I think that sums it up pretty well. Is they took over a foundation, or not really a foundation, but like a baseline of talent and roster kind of pieces that were already there, and they tried to win with it, and they did win with it, and they won 13 games in the AFC North, and they set this foundation, and then they stripped some of the aging parts of it down, and they're moving forward, and it all hinges, as we always talk about, it all hinges on can you hit on the quarterback? And if they can hit on the quarterback next year or in 2 years or whenever, and get that guy and have the ultimate roster building cheat code of a really talented quarterback on a rookie contract, then the possibilities are endless. You can build up from there, and they've given themselves the flexibility to do so by not locking in a whole lot of money, if really any, for 2025 and beyond. So yeah, we don't know if it's going to work, but I think you can see the vision of what Kwesi Adofo-Mensah wants to do and how he kind of has started this offseason in particular to build this thing in his own image, in the way that he came in wanting to do it. And now we'll see in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, if his plan works out.
Yeah. So I mean, we could answer questions all day. I know you've got things to write. Also, my friend Lindsey Brown is here. I don't know if you've ever met. Did you ever meet Lindsey when you were here? Maybe you didn't cross over in the media. She worked with me at 1500 ESPN, and she works in radio out here now, which I'm really excited to hang out with her in a few minutes. But I just wanted to say that, I mean, I mean, when it comes to this issue in particular, the 2022 draft, is they have a vision, but the main issue is they whiffed on the draft. Every single team better fire their GM then. I mean, look, we have lots of questions. We don't have time to just like go into all this. We questioned it at the outset. We had criticisms at the outset, but I don't know what team hasn't had a bad draft. The Vikings before their 2017 season had a horrible draft in 2016. Like every draft is not going to go great. Probably a first impression. Jordan Addison and Mekhi Blackman have turned out as good as you could have asked for their first two picks. They're starting and they look good. So I don't know. I mean, that's drafting for you. Anyway, I think that there are some
give it
criticisms.
time, I would say. Give him give Kwesi more than one draft class.
I just think we have to work on what we can criticize Kwesi Adofo-Mensah for and what we can't. And I think there are some people that have leaned very heavily on one thing, that draft, which I understand. But
and I think you can criticize.
Yes.
Not only the pick of Lewis Cine, but the decision to go from 12 to 32 and pass up on Kyle Hamilton and Jordan Davis and a bunch of other players. Like, I think you can criticize that. That's fair. But don't let that be the one thing that you look at in the entire body of work. Like, he brought in TJ Hawkinson in a trade. He drafted Jordan Addison. Like, there's been plenty of good as well from Kwesi. It's still been at this point like 18 months or whatever, 20 months since he took over. So let's see how this season plays out, and let's give him a little time to cook and to kind of build this thing up.
I just think that people will never accept ever, just in all football, that every team is about the same ability at drafting with only tiny little differences. And it's sometimes you hit and sometimes you don't. And if Lewis Cine turned into a really good player by right now, they'd be like, what a good draft. They got two players in the secondary, but it hasn't worked out. So that's not to excuse the decisions. It's just to say that That's how drafting is. And I think we want to look at the bigger picture, not just one draft to decide what we think of a general manager. So anyway, Will, you're the best. This went longer than expected, but great questions and great commentary from everybody in the comment section, which always is great for the show. So thanks, Will, and we'll talk to you soon, man.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. And thank you all for watching. I forgot we were live just there. I was like, oh, all right, cool. And then we'll just chat after. Never mind, we're live. Okay, I'll see you. But this is my last show for today from Vegas, and I will be here tomorrow doing some more shows as well. So we'll see you guys then. Keep your eye on the channel as well.